Welcome back to part 2, and here we will explore activities of monads and the concept of pre-existing harmony or pre-established harmony. And here we will go on to explore two kinds of activities. They are perception and appetition. And this basically forms the two types of activities of monads, and we have a small topic here which is law of identity of indiscernibles. Law of identity of indiscernibles, which is a logical corollary of the concept of activities of monads, which is perception and appetition. So all in all, let us explore these topics. Let us dive deep into activities of monads. And basically, according to Leibnitz, monads exhibit two kinds of activities: perception and appetition. And through this, Leibniz upholds his pluralistic view of the universe and makes his monadology consistent with pluralism, individualism, and unity in diversity. This is his aim or purpose or goal when he proposes the activities of monads, and through which he explains pre-established harmony. The ultimate goal is to expound the unity in diversity of the universe and bring about qualitative similarity with quantitative pluralism through the law of identity of indiscernibles, which we will explore later. For now, let's explore the two kinds of activities seen to be exhibited by our monads. And first one being perception. So Leibniz propounds that each monad is a reflection of the universe. Each monad is a reflection of the universe, or contains the reflection of the universe in its entirety. But the limiting factor here is representation, because each monad has distinct representation or unique representation. Which brings us to, this logically brings us to the law of identity of indiscernibles. We will take this up independently later, but now to make a comparison between the two kinds of activities, let us explore what he means by appetition. By appetition, Leibniz means that monads are self-mobile, or there is self-mobility in monads. From one type to another, there is self-mobility. We have seen the 5 types of monads, their hierarchy, their continuity, and what defines the hierarchy in them: the consciousness that is present in each type, and how it dictates the hierarchy of the types of monads. So there is an element of dynamism in his theory. Pluralistic, realistic, relativistic theory comes with dynamism, and with dynamism you have to explain the two major challenges with respect to dynamism. One is mobility, and another one is relation to explain that mobility. So relation will be explored in the concept of pre-established harmony, and mobility will be explained through the concept of activity or appetition. So self-mobility, or he indirectly says that there is a force by which monads evolve. There is a force by which monads evolve, and this explains that dynamism or mobility of one type of monad to the higher type of monad, and finally to the highest type of monad, which is monus monadum, the god monad. So what perpetuates this motion, or what is the catalyst that drives this motion? What is the driving force? That will be explored in the concept of appetition, where I will bring it out through an illustration. So these are the two basic activities. Now let us visually explore the concept of perception, the concept of appetition, the concept of law of identity of indiscernibles. So the law of perception says that each monad qualitatively, each monad, let us consider to be as the monad, and each monad or substance reflects the universe in its entirety. It actually reflects the universe in its entirety, and the difference comes in representation. The unity comes here, the diversity comes here. So it is unique and distinct in representation, as we have seen before while exploring the characteristics and the principle of continuity. The unity comes here in perception, and the diversity comes here in representation. The movement, of course, the hierarchy and the movement is explained through dynamism or mobility, which is appetition. So the difference in representation that we see, the uniqueness, the distinctive nature of each monad with its unique representation, though each contains a copy of the entire universe, or the universe in its entirety, though they have a similar copy of the universe in its entirety, there is a difference in the representative capabilities in each monads, which ties together unity and diversity. And this distinct or unique nature of representation can be explained through appetition or dynamism or mobility. Representation 1 by monad 1, representation 2 by monad 2, representation 3 by monad 3. This is the representation of the universe given by each of the monads. This is nothing but the medium through which the monads represent the universe. A single monad contains the reflection of the entire universe, but where it differs is the representation. So we have one single monad which is self-sustained, and we have seen in the Leibnitz order, which is a corollary of the principle of continuity, that every monad contains all info of present, and through Leibniz order we have it logically that the future itself is contained in the present, and present is nothing but a future of the past, and therefore every moment is of the future, present and the past is contained in a monad, therefore it is self-sustained and windowless. This follows from the principle of continuity and the Leibniz order that we had explored in the previous section. Therefore, a single monad is a reflection of the entire universe with the components of past, present and future. Now we come to appetition. In appetition, we basically want to explain the self-mobility feature, or the force by virtue of which there is self-evolution of monads. Qualitative evolution with respect to characteristics that we have seen, a few characteristics being force, mobility, consciousness, activity and so on. So here Leibniz defines two extreme levels. So to explain hierarchy, you need to have two extreme levels, the lowest and the highest, and then you need to explain dynamism through movement between the two hierarchies that we have seen. It can be incremental movement, or it can be a non-incremental or exponential or a direct movement. But here we see, since Leibniz has accepted 5 types of monads with each differing from the degree of consciousness with respect to each other, he is hinting at incremental movement between monads with respect to their types and characteristics. Here at the lowest he puts obscurity. Obscurity, and here at the extreme right we have clarity, which is a feature of the perfect monadom. Obscurity, feature or characteristics of the material type of monad, or the lowest type of monad. And then we have a movement from obscurity to clarity. This difference is the driving force. The action of different types of monads are dictated by these two types, which is obscurity and clarity. So we see in lower type of monads, the actions are dictated by impulsive nature. So, and in clarity, actions are dictated by will and desire. The will and desire is of course present in each type of monad, but it is dormant, and that results in actions dictated by impulse or impulsive. They are impulsive in nature. This is something to do with action. So Leibniz, of course, he was a rationalist, and every rationalist considers reason or intellect to be the valid source of knowledge, and all their philosophy revolves around reason and intellect. They put reason and intellect at the highest pedestal, and therefore for any monad, type of monad, to perform any kind of action, according to the rationalists, they have to have some sort of reasoning before they bring it into action. For every action there is a thought behind that dictates the action. Thought dictates action, and thought dictates action. We have thought dictating action. So the cause of that action is of major concern to Leibniz when he explains appetition. And in the lowest form of monads, we do not have reasoning, or we have extremely low amount of reasoning, which results in impulsive action that we can observe today in the animals who operate based on impulsive action. And humans are operating at a middle ground between impulsive action and will of desire. It is not in our control to choose the type of thought dictating our action. Sometimes it is impulsive, sometimes it is by will and desire. So humans are somewhere in the middle in the hierarchy, and the eternal entity, monus monadum, or God, purely acts based on will and desire. There is no or least amount of impulsive nature or impulsive kind of action that is performed by God. And even if there is, we cannot say that impulsive nature is zero. We can say that every action of the perfect being or God, though may seem impulsive, is a result of will and desire. That is something unfathomable. That is the property of the all-existing, undescribable God. Therefore, we can put it in simple terms, and we can estimate it that every action is dictated only by will and desire. So this is something like a case where 99.99999, and of course it's like an unimaginable case. So it's like tending to infinity. So the impulse also is a result of will and desire. So that is something which is not conceivable to us, but that is the property of the eternal or monus monadum, or the highest type of monad. So this is complete clarity. This is complete obscurity. This is at the intersection of some level of clarity and some level of obscurity. We can say it is k amount of obscurity combined with some n amount of clarity. So everything in the middle lies at a combination of k level of obscurity and n level of clarity. Action is dictated. Action is equal to k, a constant of obscurity, n level of clarity here. So when n becomes high, we are moving towards the highest type of monads, and which automatically implies that k is becoming low. So n and k are there is a relation, inverse relation between n and k. So it would be better if I had used single notation, but that is okay. We have inverse relation between n and k, and we have, with increasing n, we have decreasing k, and as n increases, we move from a more obscure view to a more clear view. This is the driving force. The thought behind the action or reason is the driving force in the process of repetition. So this explains repetition. So it is a journey from the lowest type of monad to the monus monadum, from obscurity to clarity. Now we have a very unique law, which is law of identity of indiscernibles. Basically, the law in its pure form implies that similar things are one and the same. So things between which there is no difference, no qualitative or quantitative difference, things between which there are no qualitative and quantitative difference, they are one and the same. And as corollary, we have things which are not identical, not similar, are not one and the same. So when there is either qualitative or quantitative difference, then when there is either qualitative or quantitative difference, they are not identical and it cannot be considered as one. So therefore, this is the law of identity of indiscernibles, which hints at the core of Leibniz philosophy. So we see with respect to monads that there is a unity, there is a diversity. This is just a implication from our law of identity of indiscernibles. Unity in reflection of the universe, diversity in representation. We have unity in continuity. We have diversity in hierarchy. We have unity in quality. We have diversity in quantity. And each monad, we can take physical representation of each monad. So they are at a different position in space and time. Each monad occupies different position in space and time. One monad does not engulf the other because one monad cannot physically influence the other, because each monad is unique and windowless. Therefore, we have the diversity of monads, and of course through continuity, every monad follows the principle of continuity, but continuity is about dynamism and movement, and it is about movement from one type of monad to the other. So we have nature of, we can put it as nature of continuity common between monads, and continuity or dynamism itself between different types of monads, continuity or dynamism between types. So the law of identity of indiscernibles ties together monadology of Leibnitz in a framework of unity in diversity. Finally, we come to our topic of relation between monads, the final topic. So, the aim of proposing relation between monads is to explain dynamism and to explain the entire structure in monadology, the entire purpose of the universe, the entire purpose of the universe as a whole, and which logically implies purpose of each monad. Since the universe only consists of monads, so the entire purpose of the universe as a whole, as a sum of its parts, or the purpose of each monad. Unity in diversity again, wholes as parts, this time from the lens of Leibniz. So we come to philosophy of pre-existing harmony. So basically, through pre-existing harmony, there is a corollary that follows, which is concept of God. Concept of God, we have seen God to be the highest type of monad, monus monadum. Therefore, every action of God is dictated by will and desire, purely by will and desire and no impulsion. Therefore, pre-existing harmony, the term pre-existing or established would be the proper term. the pre-establishment factor of our pre-established harmony comes through the concept of God, or the monus monadum, or the entity or the type of monad whose actions are dictated only by pure will and desire. This pure will and desire is the pre-established harmony of the universe. So often in philosophy, when we talk about the concept of God, the questions being raised are the questions with respect to organization or establishment, where the critique is that the justification for God is that the universe in its complex and organized and harmonic nature, or all the happenings of the universe which happens in most probably which happens in harmony, has to have a medium of orchestration or organization, and that medium between two organized changes is a static medium called God. Let us quickly and visually represent the philosophy of pre-existing harmony. Here we have God placed on the highest pedestal by Leibnitz. God as the orchestrator of harmony that we observe. Highest monad, monus monadum, MN. The aspiration of all monads, the goal or objective of all monads. Here we see that Leibniz philosophy is objective in nature, most probably objective in nature, where the object of becoming is God. Of course, he participates, there's an element of subjectivity. So let us have all the monads here, M1, M2, all the lower monads we can say as ML, and the highest monad we can denote it with M star. So here we have the monus monadum orchestrating the activities and functions of all the monads. Harmony and order between monads, established by God. Then we have the process of control of interaction. All interactions between monads are controlled and harmonized by God. Visual representation, quick visual representation. We have M1, M2, Mn. We have M1, M2, Mn. So we have M1 interacting with M2, M3, M4, M2 interacting with M1, M3, and so on. This is our space of interaction. Here we want to visualize interaction between monads. There is also self-interaction, self-containment of monads. Therefore, this is the interaction space, or interaction matrix, if you want to call it interaction matrix. So interaction between M1 and M1, we have M1 and M2, we have M1 and Mn, M2 and M1, M2 and M2, M2 and Mn, Mn between M1, and all the combinations of that matrix. This is controlled by God. All these interactions are controlled by God. So every interaction between each monad with the other in the universe is controlled by God, dictated by God. We have God as the controller of all the interactions, which is why we see no glitch in the matrix, as we would like to colloquially call it, or complete harmony between interactions. Even if we see a catastrophe, we ultimately conclude that it was a will or dictum of God. It is in harmony with His will and desire. It is not an anomaly in nature. It is deliberate. This connects to the problem of evil that we see in philosophy of religion, something called as problem of evil, and the necessity of evil as expounded by theists to defend God. So this is something very close to that. Now we will explore the interaction between monads. We will take the example of two monads and explore how they interact. Just zooming into the previous picture, which had all monads interacting with each other. Here we just take two monads interacting with each other. And immediately follows that they cannot interact with each other, because monads, as we have defined them qualitatively, they are windowless. So Leibniz accepts that monads are windowless, and independent. Therefore, there is no interaction between monads that can be perceived or that exists according to Leibniz. So two monads, A and B, no interaction between them. Then how do we explain the relation? So this is Leibniz's explanation. We know that monads interact, they integrate and disintegrate to form creation and destruction, and so there has to be something that explains the relation. Here again, Leibniz invokes God as the orchestrator, and instead of any kind of direct involvement or influence between the two monads with each other, we have the third element coming in, which is God. So here is the interaction. So to further break it down, we have 1, we have 2, and we have the process of 3, we have the process of 4. This is the orchestration done, and this is the process of what seems to be interaction. So here, of course, there's a doubt that even God being the monus monadum, how can there be interaction between the monus monadum and the A, which is also a type of monad? Both are types of monads. Monads cannot interact directly with each other. Then how is this interaction being shown between two monads? It will just, this diagram will just reduce to this if we make B as God. So that is the confusion that might be prevalent among the viewers, and that is a problem of will. That is a problem of will. And the problem of will, we will explore that shortly, and we will reconcile what seems to be a contradiction here. This only seems to be a contradiction. This is not a contradiction. Leibniz has given a philosophy to resolve this conflict, and that is the concept of will, which forms the heart of pre-established harmony. So we will see what will is. But for now, this is monads appearing to interact with each other. Mere appearance of interaction, this is the key term. But God is the master, controller. God is master controller. How? We will explore that when we come to the concept of will. Now we are coming to some very basic and key terms in Leibniz philosophy, and we have seen the role of God in Leibniz philosophy, and basically there is a dichotomy that exists between two types of monads. One can be called as the God. One is the God monad, and the other type is one is the God monad, and the other is not God. All those monads which are not yet God. Much like Aristotle's matterless form and formless matter, the matterless form being the prime mover and dynamism being explained through his doctrine of unfoldment. So very similar, we see habitation here, and two types of basic entities, God and not God. In pre-existing harmony, we explain things between God and not God. The type of monad which is God and the type of monad which is not God. So very similar to Madhva's Tattvavada, where he accepts two types of tattvas, which is Swatantra and Paratantra tattva. Swatantra being self-sustained, self-independent, pure, conscious, perfect bliss, or God type of monad, and everything else that is purely dependent in his point of view. But of course, in our Leibniz point of view, even this is independent but very low degree of consciousness. So an analogy that could probably help in understanding pre-established harmony. Now we will draw a grand scale diagram to reconcile the interaction and to explain that each monad is in fact independent and God appears to control it, but it is all being done on an agreed upon construct which is unfathomable yet a plausible explanation of harmony. Plan, two types of plan, master and inner, indicating plan of God, plan of each monad which is not God. Later we have the terms, common terms, unity, diversity, harmony, and coincidence. Very important term. It's of great significance to tie in unity and diversity to bridge the gap between master plan and the inner plan. Leibniz invokes the concept of coincidence. Let us pictorially represent. Here we can see the pre-established harmony in its full glory. So here we have God's master plan for each and every monad, and we have monad's inner plan. So every monad is independent, windowless, self-contained, self-determined, reflection of the universe, qualitatively same or similar, dictated by the thought of action, as we have seen in appetition and so on. And God monad is also ultimately a type of monad. So the interaction is only apparent. The interaction is that of coincidence. And this is not real interaction between them. It's not real influence between them. Each and every monad is independent to perform its own action, not directly or physically controlled by God. It is an apparent interaction which seems so that it is harmonized and controlled by the master monad, monus monadum, but it is only a coincidence that the plan of God, God's master plan, coincides with the monad's inner plan. So we have seen through hierarchical feature of principle of continuity that every monad which is higher in characteristic is a superset of the monads, the characteristics of all lower monads. So since each monad is a reflection of the entire universe, there is an element of everything present in each monad with a lower level of consciousness, lower level of mobility, lower level of force, lower level of activity. And the God has all these characteristics in the highest level. Therefore, this is God's master plan engulfing the plan of the entire universe. This is each of the monads' inner plan, which by essence contains the reflection of the entire universe, but is low with respect to representation. Therefore, each monad's inner plan coincides with the God's master plan. This is how we have both of them meeting at a common realization of a final end. So there is the ultimate goal, which is the realization of a final end in our monadology of Leibniz, and both the God's master plan and monad's inner plan gravitate to this common end or realization of a final end. They can be considered as vectors with opposite directions. So this is this can be related to our the ghost nature of particles that we see in quantum mechanics. That is the spin that we see, or when we observe the spin is one of the characteristics of a particle, and we have detectors to detect the spin of a particle, and we see that the spin of one particle, the observation of the spin of one of the particles dictates the spin of the other particles in the other dictator, irrespective of the fact that irrespective of the separation of both the detectors. We observe two particles, and both of them pass through detectors, spin detectors, and they are not bound by any space. They can be these two can be placed anywhere at a distance of any arbitrary distance called x, not bound by distance. And irrespective of x, when we observe the spin as an up spin, and so there are basically two types of spins, the up and the down. And if one detector has the particle with spin detected as up, instantly, or almost what we can call as instantaneously, we have the other detector showing downspin. So what is this string that connects them together beyond space? This is almost like an instantaneous passage of information, or what we call as coincidence. This is like pre-established harmony in through the lens of science. So this ghost effect that we observe in particles is something similar to the coincidence that Leibniz might be hinting at between God's master plan and each monad's inner plan that gravitate to a common final end. And so this is the ultimate purpose and aim of each monad, and the aim is to realize the final state of all monads, bring in that element of pre-established harmony through coincidence of both the plans. And the monad's inner plan is like dictated by reflection and urge. We have seen this urge as appetition in the form of appetition, the movement, dynamism explained in the form of urge and appetition, the fire that keeps the mobility of monads active. So this is pre-established harmony, and we would like to end it in a very interesting quote given by monad himself with respect to bodies. So we'll explore monad's bodies first. Concept of body. We see that monad's Leibniz concept of monadology completely negates the concept of body or extendability. We have seen that the only attribute of monads are thought. Only attribute is cogito. Only attribute is cogito, and which is unextendability or activity. Therefore, there is no scope for extendability or body. Therefore, Leibniz negates the body matter and body mind dualism. Negated. And so, interestingly, we can draw a corollary from this, that there is no depth in Leibniz philosophy as there is no body, and since there is nothing dead, there is no body. This is like a closed loop, perpetual system, self-explanatory. No body, therefore nothing is dead. No body, therefore nothing dead. Nothing dead, therefore no body. So this is like a self-contained perpetual inference mechanism in Leibniz system. So, but we do observe extendable bodies in the universe. And how does Leibniz explain bodies? How do you explain bodies? Leibniz definition of bodies goes on as: body is an aggregate of monads So we have seen the concept of aggregation in Spinoza as well, but this is like a more complex form of aggregation. When he says body is an aggregate of monads, there is an organization which we observe, organization in the aggregation. So it is an organized whole. We saw the dualists attacking Spinoza in terms of organization, but here we see that Leibniz kind of accepts the form of organized whole. The body is an organized whole, and what dictates this organization is, of course, the monads itself. And since monads are all perfect and plural in number, and they differ in degree of consciousness, the monad with the highest degree of consciousness in a body dictates this organization between the aggregates of monads. So this is very much possible in Leibniz philosophy, and that monad with the highest amount of consciousness in a body is called queen monad, or let us call it as QM, queen monad. And the properties of queen monad is to mirror activity. It mirrors the activity. We have seen each monad is a reflection of the entire universe, but with a different degree of representation based on the level of consciousness. Therefore, queen monad with the highest level of consciousness in a body mirrors activity. Activity of what? Activity of surrounding monads. Because surrounding monads are also part of the entire universe, and each monad is reflection or contains the information of the entire universe. Therefore, we see mirroring activity of surrounding monads, and through the aggregate we have seen that body is an aggregate organized by the monad with the highest consciousness, which we call queen monad, and through the aggregate or the body it mirrors activity of the universe. This is like a interdependent system, and one explains the other. So it mirrors actually the surrounding monads, and through the aggregate or through the surrounding monads it mirrors the activity of the entire universe. So this is the function of the body, a definition of a body, and the role of queen monad in the body. So a pictorial representation of queen monad can be, so we will just imagine the framework of a body. There is no such thing as body in Leibniz philosophy, but it is just an aggregate of monads. So we will just draw the aggregate in the form of a body that will help in visualization. Here we have different monads, completely different monads, and an aggregate of monads is what we call a body. Aggregate of monads, and monads come with different types. So no need to say that all these monads are of different types. They're unique, but they are infinitely small, infinite in number, and vary in degree of consciousness. So that dictates their type, and body is an aggregate of different types of monads, and we have the highest type of monads among all these monads. I'm just drawing it at the center so that it can draw some attention. There is no need or geometric necessity of the queen monad to be at a particular place in the body. This is just for representation, and this is our monad in the aggregate with highest amount of consciousness. Therefore this acts as the queen monad. Here we have it reflecting all other monads, the activity of all other monads, and through this reflection we have an aggregate being formed in this dotted line shape, and through this aggregate it reflects the entire universe. This is his definition of body. There is no actual body, everything is an aggregate of monads of different types, with the queen monad being the highest monad in this aggregate, the monad with the highest amount of consciousness, and which has two properties of mirroring the activity of surrounding monads, and through the aggregate of surrounding monads mirroring the activity of the entire universe. And for each monad, cogito is the only property. Therefore, body in Leibniz. We have seen this, no body, therefore nothing dead, therefore implies no body. And the famous quote that we would like to explore is, Leibniz says that bodies act as if there were no souls. Souls act as if there were no bodies, and both act as if they influence each other. This quote by Leibniz encapsulates his entire philosophy, and deconstruction of this quote, or dissecting this quote word by word, gives rise to a complete understanding of monadology, from the characteristics of monads, properties of monads, comparison, and we have the property of continuity, the law of identity of indiscernibles, the continuity, the hierarchy. Then we have the relation between monads, the activity, perception, appetition, and pre-existing harmony, relation, the role of coincidence, and everything can be dissected from this all-encompassing statement of Leibniz. And he says that bodies act as if there were no souls. This is the notion of appearance, and souls act as if there were no bodies. So the aggregate is nothing more than the body is nothing more than an aggregate of monads, and both act as if they are influencing each other. The interaction is apparent, the interaction is only apparent, and there is a pre-established harmony because of which we feel that both act as if they influence each other. This feeling that both are influencing each other comes from the notion of harmony, and that harmony is pre-existing, and that pre-existing harmony is dictated by coincidence between the plans of God and the plan of each individual monad. Some of the critics might be, we will just explore two critics of Leibniz, and one of them, the most primary form of critic, is that the hazy nature of coincidence. This is often a form of attack on Leibniz philosophy. So what is that medium that is orchestrating the coincidence or the ghost nature between the two plans, which is master and inner plan, and the role of determinism? There is no clear-cut view on determinism in Leibniz philosophy because of this. So it is not fully deterministic like Spinoza. It is not a fully deterministic system, and it is not a completely free system. It's not an indeterminate system, or completely free, or completely posteriori kind of a system. And the role of free will and choice, and the notion of God. Also, there is attack on the notion of God propounded by Leibniz. The notion of God not in line with rationalism, and probably making his philosophy a little bit theistic. He goes on to say that there is a will, an ultimate will of God, and there is a coincidence between the will of God and the will of the other monads. There is a pre-established harmony, a unique form of determinism, which we can call as pseudo-determinism, nevertheless determinism. And this determinism isn't fully deterministic or stringent, but it is an agreed upon form of determinism by both the entities in Leibniz monadology, and therefore lies somewhere between fully and free determinism, where free will and choice is respected, but is constrained to be in line with the will and desire of God. Will and desire of God, and this is kind of an asymptote between the asymptote of free will and choice of individual monad is that of will of desire and will of desire of God, or will and desire of God. So this is kind of hazy nature of coincidence, which leads to a complex form of determinism in his philosophy, and he ends up accepting a notion of God which is kind of theistic, and this theistic God is the theistic God and his activities, and the whole function of pre-established harmony is not in line with perfect rationalism, and somewhere Leibniz escapes into the world of metaphysics, inexplicable, unfathomable metaphysics, through his concept of organization or pre-established harmony.